Last night's episode of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert descended into extraordinary chaos when Ricky Gervais demanded "say that again" after Stephen Colbert accused him of using comedy as a shield for spreading genuine bigotry to millions. The British comedian didn't just defend his work. He exposed Colbert's own history of offensive comedy that CBS had desperately tried to erase from the internet. But what started as promotion for Gervais's new HBO special would reveal disturbing truths about how late-night hosts selectively enforce standards they themselves violate. The Ed Sullivan Theater was charged with unusual tension from the moment Gervais arrived. The 62-year-old comedian was there to discuss his latest special examining comedy censorship, a project that had already generated significant controversy for its unapologetic approach to taboo subjects. But Stephen Colbert had prepared something far more aggressive than typical late-night banter. A production assistant later revealed, overhearing Colbert tell his writers, "This transphobic British prick thinks consequences don't apply to him. Let's show him they do." The preparation materials included carefully edited clips from Gervais's routines designed to appear maximally offensive without their comedic context. The warm-up comedian had been instructed to prime the audience with jokes about comedians who refuse to evolve and old men who confuse cruelty with cleverness. Therefore, when the cameras rolled at 11:37 that evening, Gervais walked into what was essentially an orchestrated ambush disguised as entertainment. The show opened with Colbert's typical political monologue, but he made several pointed references to comedians who've lost touch with basic human decency and the difference between pushing boundaries and pushing hatred. Gervais waited backstage, apparently playing Candy Crush on his phone with complete indifference to the hostile atmosphere building in the theater. His manager would later describe him as weirdly giddy, like a kid about to reveal he knows where the Christmas presents are hidden. The band played him on with notably less enthusiasm than usual, and when Colbert announced, "Please welcome Ricky Gervais," the audience applause was mixed with audible tension. Gervais walked out with his characteristic bounce, giving Colbert an elaborate handshake that somehow felt like mockery. "Ricky, your new special has been called transphobic, homophobic, racist, and misogynistic. That's quite an achievement. Are you proud of yourself?" Colbert began immediately, not even pretending to welcome him properly. Gervais's grin widened impossibly. "Stephen, lovely to see you too." Still pretending to be progressive while doing homophobic impressions of Trump and Putin? "That's commitment to hypocrisy," he said cheerfully. The studio went completely silent. Colbert's face tightened visibly. "Those are political satire," he said quickly. "Oh, political satire. So homophobia is fine if it's about people you don't like? Interesting moral framework you've got there," Gervais replied, settling into his chair like he owned it. Therefore, the reversal had begun immediately. Colbert tried to regain control. "We're here to discuss your problematic content, not deflect," he said. "Problematic. Your favorite word. Remember when you did that impression of a Chinese diplomat? The one CBS deleted from everywhere? Was that problematic or just racism you've buried?" Gervais asked casually. The audience began murmuring. Several people were already searching for the mentioned clip on their phones. Colbert's confidence was visibly shaking. But Gervais was just warming up to his systematic destruction. "You want to discuss offensive comedy? Let's discuss yours. The gay jokes you did on the Colbert Report that you now pretend never happened. Should I quote them?" he asked, pulling out his phone. "That was a character," Colbert protested desperately. "A character you created and wrote. So you wrote homophobic jokes, but it doesn't count because you were pretending to be someone else? That's not defense, that's cowardice," Gervais replied. He turned to the audience, his presence commanding the entire theater. "This man has spent 20 years making offensive jokes, but now he's the moral arbiter of comedy. The evolution isn't genuine. It's career preservation," he told them. "I've grown and learned," Colbert claimed. "Have you? Or have you just learned what's currently profitable to say? There's a difference between evolution and opportunism," Gervais observed. But then he revealed something that stunned everyone. "Your former writer contacted me. Told me about the jokes you wanted to do about trans people, but legal said no. You didn't evolve, Stephen. You were muzzled," he said. "That's a lie," Colbert said, but his voice cracked. Really? Should I show the emails? Your writer kept receipts because he knew you'd throw him under the bus. Turns out he was right, Gervais replied. He stood up suddenly. Say that again, he commanded. Say I'm lying about your attempted trans jokes. Say it clearly. The challenge hung in the air. Colbert couldn't speak. The power dynamic had completely reversed. The audience was entirely on Gervais's side now. Can't say it? Because you know legal will confirm it if pressed. You're not progressive, Stephen. You're just scared of consequences, Gervais said. I support all communities, Colbert said weakly. Do you? Then explain your writer's room. Explain the diversity you preach but don't practice. Explain why every decision-maker on your show looks exactly like you, Gervais challenged. The camera operators were visibly uncomfortable. Several audience members were recording despite theater policy. But Gervais delivered another devastating blow. You know what the difference is between us? I make jokes about everyone because I believe in actual equality. You make jokes about approved targets because you believe in hierarchy. That's not progressivism. That's selective prejudice, he said. You're twisting everything, Colbert protested. Am I? Then let's be specific. Quote one genuinely bigoted thing I've said. Not offensive, not edgy, actually bigoted. Go ahead, Gervais challenged. Colbert shuffled through his notes frantically, but couldn't find anything that qualified. The distinction between offensive comedy and actual bigotry was being illustrated perfectly. Can't find any? That's because there aren't any. But should I play your audio mocking Middle Eastern accents? The bit that almost got you canceled until you claimed it was satire? Gervais asked. He played the audio from his phone. Colbert's voice filled the theater doing exactly what Gervais described. The audience gasped. Several people booed Colbert. That was taken out of context, Colbert said desperately. The context was you thinking accent mockery was funny. But my jokes about identity are the problem? Your hypocrisy is showing, Gervais replied. He walked toward the exit, then stopped. I'm walking off your show, but not before I explain something about comedy and cowardice, he said. Real comedians take risks. We offend everyone equally because we believe in actual equality. You only offend approved targets because you're terrified of your own audience. That's not comedy. That's compliance, he continued. I have principles, Colbert claimed. You have focus groups. There's a difference between principles and polling data. You don't tell jokes anymore, Stephen. You tell approved messages with punchlines, Gervais replied. But then he revealed the most damaging information. You know what your audience warm-up guy told me? That you review every joke for potential backlash. That you've killed more material than you've aired. That's not evolution. That's fear, he said. I'm responsible with my platform, Colbert said defensively. You're terrified of your platform. You've become so scared of offending that you've forgotten how to be funny. When did you last take an actual comedic risk? Gervais asked. The question hung in the air. Colbert couldn't answer. His entire recent career had been safe, predictable, approved. The audience could see it clearly now. You want to know why my specials succeed despite controversy? Because people are starved for honesty. You're feeding them processed, focus-grouped, committee-approved content and wondering why they're hungry for something real, Gervais said. He looked directly at the camera. To everyone watching, remember this. The people policing comedy are usually the ones with the most to hide. The loudest voices demanding censorship often have the worst histories. And those claiming moral superiority are usually morally compromised, he said. This will destroy your American career, Colbert threatened. Gervais laughed so hard, he actually had to steady himself on a chair. My career? Netflix just offered me $60 million for 2 specials. HBO wants 3 more. Your threats are as empty as your comedy, he said. But then he delivered the philosophical killing blow. You know what your real problem is, Stephen? You've confused being liked with being funny. You've chosen applause over laughter. You've become a cheerleader when you used to be a comedian, he said. I'm still a comedian, Colbert insisted. No, you're a progressive preacher who sometimes tells jokes. There's a difference between comedy and confirmation bias with punchlines. You provide the latter, Gervais replied. As he reached the exit, he turned back one final time. Oh, and Stephen, your audience isn't laughing with you anymore. They're clapping for you. There's a difference. Think about that, he said. He walked off to thunderous applause. The entire audience stood, many cheering. Colbert sat alone at his desk, completely destroyed. The band didn't even play him off. "We'll be right back," Colbert mumbled, but his voice was broken. Within seconds, #Gervais destroys Colbert was trending globally. The clips went viral instantly across every platform. The audio of Colbert's deleted offensive content resurfaced everywhere. Former Late Show writers began confirming Gervais's claims. Stories emerged about killed jokes, focus group testing, and Colbert's paranoid fear of cancellation. The evidence was overwhelming. Colbert attempted damage control the next night. Last night's guest chose confrontation over conversation. "I won't dignify his attacks with a response," he said. But the audience response was hostile. Comments flooded in calling him a hypocrite. His ratings plummeted immediately. The careful image he'd constructed was shattered. Gervais released a brilliant statement. "I went on to discuss comedy. Stephen wanted to discuss morality. So we discussed this. He didn't enjoy seeing his own reflection. Most hypocrites don't." The statement went viral for its simplicity and devastation. It sparked massive discussions about comedy, censorship, and selective moral outrage. CBS put The Late Show on temporary hiatus for retooling. But everyone knew it was damage control. Colbert's credibility as a moral voice was destroyed. Meanwhile, Gervais's special broke all streaming records. His destruction of Colbert became legendary in comedy circles. Comics studied it as a masterclass in exposing hypocrisy. The incident became known as the Gervais Revelation, showing that moral authorities in comedy often had the most immoral histories. Universities taught it as a case study in selective outrage. But the deeper impact was on late-night television itself. Gervais had exposed how it had become propaganda disguised as entertainment, sermons disguised as comedy, compliance disguised as progressivism. Colbert never fully recovered. His show continued, but with diminished influence. He'd become what he'd once mocked, a toothless entertainer afraid of his own shadow. Years later, comedians would still reference pulling a Gervais, meaning to expose a critic's hypocrisy with their own history. It became the ultimate defensive move in comedy. Gervais himself would later say, "Stephen Colbert tried to destroy me for offensive jokes while hiding his own. That's like an arsonist becoming a fire inspector." The irony was delicious, and irony is all he had left. The empty theater Gervais walked out of became symbolic. It represented the hollow nature of performative progressivism in entertainment, the void where genuine comedy once lived. And Stephen Colbert, who'd built a career on claiming moral superiority, was exposed as morally bankrupt. The comedian who'd played a character pretending to be conservative was revealed as a character pretending to be progressive. In the end, Say That Again became more than a challenge. It became a moment when false moral authority met genuine comedic courage. When someone who policed others' comedy was forced to confront their own. The audience that night witnessed something extraordinary. A comedian destroying a late-night host not with prepared jokes, but with simple truth. Gervais had shown that the best defense against accusations of offensive comedy was exposing the offensive reality of the accuser. The man who'd been invited on to be scolded had instead done the scolding. The guest who was supposed to apologize had made the host sorry he'd ever brought him on. And Ricky Gervais, walking off into the New York night, had left behind a revelation. Those who demand comedy evolve have usually just evolved into cowards.